distance in front of them and rushed across the road, only a yard or so ahead. It terrified the horses, who broke into a wild and uncontrollable gallop, and in a moment they were hurtling at breakneck pace towards the river. Pandora had been told exactly what happened. The old gig had smashed against the bridge, and her father and mother had been thrown down a steep embankment and into the river itself. Her father's neck had been broken, while her mother, knocked unconscious, had fallen face downwards into the water and drowned. Pandora often wished that she had been with them and that she too had died. When her uncle, the bishop, had with obvious reluctance and a great deal of hypocritical magnanimity taken her to live with him and his wife in the palace, she had thought it would be impossible ever to laugh again. Certainly there was nothing to laugh about in the company of her uncle and aunt. They were not physically cruel to her, but they obviously resented her presence, and everything she did was wrong in their eyes. It was impossible to please them, however hard she tried, and after a while, because she was intelligent, she realized that it was her looks that offended her aunt more than anything else. She was very like her mother, and her heart-shaped face and large pansy-coloured eyes were such a contrast to her aunt's overblown figure and lined face that she could in fact understand why the older woman resented her. There were always innumerable tasks for her to do, and although she was prepared to do them willingly, the results were never precisely what her aunt wanted. Now she was quite sure that there would be something wrong with the cushion. She would have sewn it too tight or too loosely, or it would not have been pressed to her aunt's satisfaction, and there was every likelihood of her having to do it all over again. Then, with a sigh of relief, she realized that her uncle and aunt were leaving at noon for London. They had been invited to the garden party to be given by the Bishop of London at Lambeth Palace. It was an event which her aunt looked forward to year after year, and for 3 weeks Pandora had been altering her gown, including adding extra lace, refurbishing her bonnet, and doing innumerable renovations to the sunshade she would carry. Whatever Aunt Sophie wore, with her stout figure she would look ungainly, and that was undoubtedly one of the reasons why at breakfast she looked with distinct animosity at Pandora's slender figure, which could not be disguised by the plain, almost Puritan-like gown she was wearing. It had been the usual silent meal, because the bishop did not like talking early in the morning. Instead, he read the Times, propped up in front of him on a silver holder that was polished assiduously by the butler. 2 footmen handed round a large amount of food in silver dishes, from which Augustus Stratton and his wife reinforced themselves for the journey which lay ahead. Pandora ate very little, and was relieved when her aunt gave her 3 lists on closely written sheets of paper. "These are the things you are to do while I am away, Pandora," she said in her hard voice. "There is no need to be slack and indolent because your uncle and I are not here. You will tick off each thing as you do it, and I shall expect every item to be completed before I return on Friday." "I will do my best, Aunt Sophie." "Then let us hope that your best is better than it usually is," her aunt said scathingly. Pandora took the lists, rose from the table, curtsied, and left the room. Once she had closed the door, she ran to the small sitting room where she kept her sewing basket and other personal things. But instead of reading the lists as she should have done, she went to the window to look out at the sunshine and thought with a feeling of joy that she was free. Free for 3 days from fault-finding and grumbling, of veiled innuendos about her father and mother, and of undisguised criticisms of herself and her appearance. "What shall I do? How shall I spend the time?" she asked, and knew the answer. As soon as her uncle and aunt had left, she would ride over to Chart and talk to the villagers there who had loved her father and mother. She would not go to the vicarage, for she could not bear to see other people living in what she still thought of as her home. But there were others who would welcome her gladly because she was her father's daughter and because they had known her ever since she was a small child. She put the cushion back onto the chair on which it belonged and thought again how ugly it was. As she did so, the door by the fireplace in the corner of the room gave a little click, and she realized it had blown open because someone had entered her uncle's study.